This spring we decided we could use a little more recreation in our life. So we went to our local dealer and we bought the Moto Z-Force 1000. So now we've put about 2,000 miles on it, and we thought we'd tell you the good, the bad, and the ugly on it. The reason that we bought this particular model, we knew we wanted a 60-inch wide machine for stability. So that ruled out the 500 automatically because that's only available in 50-inch. And so then it was between the 850 and the 1000. And sales apparently were excellent this year on these side-by-sides. And we had the choice of this 60-inch model in orange in the 1000 or the 850s in either blue or silver. We were originally thinking an 850, but I wanted orange, so that's how we ended up with the 1000 instead of the 850. And overall, I think we've been very happy that we chose that upgrade because it does have a really nice amount of power, and we've found it to be a good machine for doing the hill climbs and stuff that we do have a few of around here.
Yeah, and it's actually 800 on the smaller one, not 850. The one big difference between the two, though, is the 800 has what they call a wet clutch and will engine brake all the way down to 0 miles an hour and hold you still, whereas the 1000 has a dry clutch and actually will engine brake you down to about 4 miles an hour, and then it lets go and it freewheels. Not a real big deal either way, as long as you know it's going to do that. I wouldn't say either one's good or bad. That's just something to point out as the difference between the 800 and the 1000. The power level, I think, around what we do around here, either one would be okay. But yeah, orange won out. Biggest reason we picked CF Moto, honestly, is availability. We looked at used machines, there was nothing around. We looked at new machines, there was nothing around. And the CF Moto was still readily available. We read a lot of reviews on it. Some were mixed, some were great, and we decided to give it a chance and try it. It was considerably less expensive than anything else. Some of the things that sold us on it was that it came with like the half doors, so this orange part of the door. It came with a winch and it came with the roof. So that was standard on the machine. So I guess moving forward, do we want to talk about what we added to it over the course of the summer? So the bottom half of the doors came from Super ATV, and Sue can explain why we did the bottom half of the doors.
So for most of the first part of the season, we rode around without the doors. It is kind of nice for airflow, but when you go through puddles, as we obviously do a fair amount of around here, the mud will actually splash up and it'll hit you in the side of the thigh, and the whole side of your leg gets a little bit damp and pretty muddy. So that was definitely a drawback. And in really dusty conditions, the dust comes kind of up off the tires and you do get more in the cab. So both of those things were considerations. We may take the doors off, the lower half of the doors off, during the hot part of the season. We haven't had them on, and they definitely do hold in some of the heat. Around here, we don't tend to get that much hot weather, at least not for extended periods of time. So we'll just have to see what next summer brings as far as whether we leave those on or take them off for part of the summer.
Yeah, and to add on to that, if you're not familiar with the side-by-sides in general, they all tend to create a lot of heat from the radiator and the engine and the hoses underneath the belly of the machine. So they tend to throw a lot of heat into the cab. So if it's 90 degrees out, you may not want all of that extra heat. But when it's this time of year, it's really handy. So that was the doors. We'll put a link in the description to all these parts. The next thing we purchased was the Super ATV. You'll see a trend here. A Super ATV rock guards. Biggest reason there was that we just found that we were on some trails where we were bottoming out, and we'll put this up on the lift a little later and show you underneath, but there's a couple pieces of the machine that hang down. They're a little vulnerable, and we just felt that was a good investment to protect that and ride along on the rocks. What else?
the first thing we actually purchased was the windshield. That was a pretty critical piece of equipment. If you want to go over about 15 miles an hour, it gets very, very windy in the cab of all of these side-by-sides. So if you don't want to wear a full face helmet or go really slow, it's pretty much mandatory to put a windshield in this. This particular windshield, I believe, is also Super ATV.
Yep.
It came with a, it has the ability to open up using a pop system, and it has one setting where it's closed, one setting where it's half open or partially open, and one setting where it's all the way open. Something we added to it was this additional spot, which allows you to have a little bit extra airflow, but without having the windshield all the way open. So that is an aftermarket addition to the aftermarket windshield that Ryan did. And we have found that to be nice on some of our trips.
And anybody looking to do that, it's actually pretty straightforward. That's a piece of Schedule 40 PVC electrical conduit or water pipe, either one, PVC water pipe, and it fits perfectly into the socket. And what we did is we took a round file and we just made a little recess in the holder, and we drilled a hole through here bigger than the head of the screw, and then we drilled a pilot hole through everything else, and we just put a screw up in there. And that works, as Sue mentioned, really well. It gives you that much extra space. Or you can, like say, shut it and latch it down. One of the other things we added to it was a LED light bar up here on the roof. You'll find that at night they all have okay headlights, but if you're out going down the railroad bed or around the edge of a cornfield, there's a lot of wildlife, and to be able to see a little farther ahead and know if a deer is coming out in front of you or something like that, the light bar was, I would also consider, a mandatory upgrade.
And that was from Tractor Supply.
And then the last thing that we added to it is the back window screen. It is actually a screen, it's not solid, and the combination of these things work together to keep the dust out of the cab. So the screen allows some airflow, the windshield creates the negative air pressure inside, and the doors seal it off. So when it is dusty, with those three items, you don't get much dust in the cab at all. It's actually quite a lot nicer. So that's the whole purpose of that screen, is to help with the dust control and keep the dust out when you're riding in dusty conditions. So, I mean, that's kind of the things we've added to it. So I think maybe we want to talk about some of the issues, or maybe not issues, but just the good and the bad and the ugly, I think, is where we want to go with that. So you want to start?
I think our biggest complaint on this particular machine would be the seat belts. From the factory, even day one, they were a little bit obnoxious as far as occasionally locking up when they shouldn't have been. And so you would go to put them on and they would lock up, or you would lean forward and they would lock up. And that seems to be a pretty common problem. And one of the things that exacerbates that problem further is that there's actually a space up underneath the machine where there isn't a floorboard, and that allows dirt and mud to come up into that seat belt. And with a little bit of time and a lot of mud, that basically causes the seat belts to stop functioning. So we do have a fix for that. We are going to add aftermarket seat belts, and we'll do a video on the install of that. They're a 4-point harness system, but we definitely did find the seat belts to be completely inadequate in this machine.
Yeah, and to add to what Sue mentioned, the root problem is the fact that all the debris gets up in there. It is a very harsh environment to expect something like a normal seat belt to work very well. So I don't suspect this is this particular machine so much as it might be a function of all ATVs. To be clear, this is our very first side-by-side. But I will say that there is a big hole in the floor, and we'll show you that here in just a second, underneath the seat belt. So if I was purchasing this machine new, knowing what I know now, I would put a piece of rubber under that seat belt and cover that hole. It'll also help you because when you do hit a puddle, the water will splash up and get in your back in the hole in the seat here. So I'm gonna have Sue grab the camera and come over here and we'll show you the hole in the seat and the hole in the side by side. All right, so one of the nice features is the seat. There's a button right down here you grab and the seat lifts right out. It's very easy to clean, work on, etc. So this is the seat belt in question. This particular seat belt has about 2,000 miles on it and is now, well, we fixed it, but temporarily, but it was broken to the point where it would not actually pull out. So it was locked right here on a ride and we couldn't pull it out to actually use it. But this is the hole we're talking about down in here. And I think if she comes over and looks down, you'll actually see the grass down through it. There's a couple holes under that driver's seat that could be pretty easily plugged up with, I mean, literally even a piece of duct tape, but we're just going to use a couple pieces of thin rubber and some self-tapping screws. But that's, you know, it's kind of minor, but it's one of those things that the seatbelt is mandatory. We've felt since day one that a single shoulder harness really, you know, for what this machine is and what you're doing with it, we've always felt like the 4-point harness might be a little bit safer. So that really wasn't a big surprise to us. In the back, the grease fittings for the bottom pivot on the rear wheel, which we'll show you in the shop when we get it on the lift, they put a straight grease fitting on it and a grease gun will not fit on it. So we're going to have to find some 90-degree grease fittings to screw in there. And currently we've got an adapter on the grease gun that works pretty well, but not a big deal because a lot of these things aren't even greasable. So kudos to CF Moto for putting grease fittings on. Just they could have put 90-degree fittings on that. The other thing that we do have going on is on the front A-arm, the hole in the frame where the bolt goes through is starting to wear out a little. And I think that's also indicative of any of these side-by-sides, not just CF Moto. The way the A-arms work, like in a passenger's car, you have the bushings that go through the A-arm, and then you have a steel pipe that goes inside the bushings. And when you tighten the bolt down through the frame, it actually, you know, clenches onto that steel pipe, and then the bushings pivot on that pipe. In the side-by-sides, at least everyone I've looked at so far, there is not an inner pipe in there. So by nature, everything moves just a little bit, and that bolt starts to hollow out the hole in the frame. It's really no big deal at all. We're just going to take this winter, we're going to get a heavy washer, and we're going to go ahead and weld that washer over the hole in the frame, put the bolt back in, the problem goes away. Just something to be aware of when you're doing a service on it. Put it on the lift, you know, check all your tires, check everything, make sure nothing's loose. So I'll let Sue wrap up with our opinion on it, and then we're going to go ahead and put it in the shop, and we're going to show you a little tour underneath of it.
So overall, we've been very pleased with the machine. It's done everything we've asked it to do. We've gone through some pretty heavy mud. We've done some decent hill climbs. The power seems to be really good on it, and the comfort is very good. It rides well. We did adjust all of the shocks when we got it, and it has a lot of adjustability. It came with a pretty decent shock package from the factory. So at 2,000 miles, if we were to look at it again with the other options out there, we believe that this is a very good value for the dollar, and we would definitely buy this machine again.
All right, so we've got the machine in the shop on the lift, and I kind of want to do a 360-degree walk around and point out some of the stuff. On the back side, comes standard with tail lights and brake lights, license plate light, and a receiver hitch. The thing is rated to tow. I'm not sure I would tow with it, but I'm not sure I'd tow with any of them, so that's not, you know, something I'd say about CF Moto. Up under here, you might have to take my word for it, I'm not sure you can see it, but it comes in the glove box. There's actually a trailer plug that goes in there for lights on a trailer, so your trailer could actually have lights. We were talking about grease fittings. You'll notice all the A-arms have grease fittings. And again, on the inside in here, we'll show you those ones when we get it up in the air. External reservoir gas shocks with adjustable rebound and compression, and preload. So there's a lot of adjustability, as Sue had mentioned, and this summer basically we did a lot of riding with a lot of other people with other brands, and it was interesting to see the different terrains that caused, you know, one machine would be better on, and different terrains one machine would be better on. Tire pressure plays a big role, getting the tire pressure down where it needs to be. The belt is in under here. Don't really know exactly how often we're going to change it. I've got to look at the instructions from CF Moto, but once you take the battery cover off, you can pull the bolts out of the belt cover and change the belts in behind there. This cover here with the two 10mm bolts is a battery cover. Your battery's in under there. And then as we come around, you know, we pointed out the rock guards. We come around the front of the machine, and this is the, you can't really see it, but you can just barely, you know, you can just barely hear it clunk, and you can just barely see the AR move up in there. Not really a big deal. Like I said, we're just going to weld a washer on there and make that a little more sturdy. Winch is factory. Does have a little compartment up here where you can store some stuff. We have a set of booster cables, some spare oil, things like that in there. Same thing down this side, nothing really different over here. And then if you can get around over here, this is where the air filter is. In under this box. So this box right here is where the air filter is. And like I said, there's a 10mm screw there and there. That comes off. The cover of the airbox pops off. To add to, you know, what we talked about outside, we really haven't had any mechanical issues. The only mechanical issue we've had at all, period, is we had, well, the seat belt. So, okay, we have had one mechanical issue. Other than that, the only issue we've had is we had a small oil leak on the oil filter housing. We've actually done a video to that. We'll try to leave a link down below for that as well. I believe that was my fault for not getting the O-ring clean enough when I put it back together. So you'll see in that video, we just disassembled it, cleaned up the O-ring, put it right back together, no more oil leak. And it was a very small leak. It was just enough that I wanted to address it. So we'll go ahead and we're going to put it up in the air and show you the underneath of the machine. All right, so one of the things that concerns me a little bit, this plug right here is a drain plug on the rear differential. And you'll see where, I mean, they got this rail here, and you get this back here, but that's fairly, you know, exposed. And we've hit a lot of rocks. Matter of fact, you can see the corner right here, and that corner there are all bent up from hitting rocks. And it makes me a little nervous with that sticking down there. So what we're probably going to do over the winter as well is make some kind of plate that goes under these two bolts. Matter of fact, we may even just take this hitch right off because we don't use it at all. And we're probably going to make some kind of plate that comes from that and comes over and you know, hooks into here with something. Something that we can take off, obviously, to drain it, because we do like to change the differential oil. We don't worry about the manufacturer's recommendations. It holds less than a quart of gear oil for the front and rear end. So we basically change it every time we change the oil, which is about every 600 to 700 miles, which is probably also way too often, but it's so cheap that, you know, why wouldn't you take care of it? Moving forward, you'll see it does have a steel skid plate over the transmission and then a plastic skid plate every place else. These are the pieces I was talking about here. This is the fuel tank right here. And then this one over here, you can see is already bent. I don't know exactly what's up under that one. Some kind of a tank, maybe something to do with the emissions. I'm not 100% sure, but you'll see that one's already bent up pretty good. So that's what kind of sold us to put them on there, and you can see the marks where the rocks have drug on that. So again, that's one of those things where we may actually do something a little bit stiffer over that this winter, where we cover that with more of a skid plate so it doesn't catch and bend that up. Not a terribly big deal. It's just one of those things that, you know, you might as well take care of it while you can. So then when you get up to the front, that's a metal skid plate on everything. So it's all pretty solid. Not really any concerns or dangers up there. The front differential is up and under that quite a ways. And again, we change oil in that every time we change the engine oil. Fairly reasonable to do. So I think that's about it. You know, if there's any questions, leave them down below. If there's something you'd like to know about the machine or see, something you'd like us to show you particularly about the machine, let us know. We did our own first service. We adjusted the valves. It took us about an hour to do that. It is a bit of a process to take the plastic off to get to the front cylinder on the engine, but it's a pretty straightforward project. So yeah, I would say please like and subscribe and leave your questions down below. We'll link to all the products we've put on the machine, and we'll link to the other video on the machine.